Hi guys, welcome to Crosstalk, your local podcast brought to you by Republic Polytechnic Diploma in Mass Communications and Singapore Red Cross. Come and join us in hearing the conversations and perspectives of various Red Cross leaders.
We'll be covering various topics ranging from blood donation to caring for the elderly and many more. So get yourselves comfortable, maybe grab yourself some drinks and snacks because the conversations we're about to have is gonna be interesting. So stay tuned.
Hi guys, welcome to Crosstalk, a local podcast proudly brought to you by RP's Diploma in Mass Communication and the Singapore Red Cross.
We are so excited to have you here today as we talk to leaders from the Singapore Red Cross about the social changes that they've championed.
I'm Ishwareen,
And I'm Angela.
and here with us we have Selene. Welcome, Selene.
Thank you for having me.
So, Selene, how are you feeling today?
I'm good. How are you guys?
To be honest, I'm actually quite curious about today's episode. So, would you like to tell us a bit more about yourself?
Sure. My name is Selene, and I'm overseeing the Community Resilience Department of the Singapore Red Cross, focusing a lot on what we call the Family LifeAid Programme. So as the name would suggest, we look after the most vulnerable families in Singapore.
Okay. So, could you tell us a bit more about why you joined this?
So I've been with the Singapore Red Cross for about 6 years, but I actually started off in the fundraising department because it was just like by association the most convenient department to get into. So I was there for 2 years. Before that, I was doing international work with another organization. And one day we just stumbled upon a gentleman who lived in a rental flat who came to ask, you're doing so much work for international people overseas. Have you ever considered doing anything for the people in Singapore? And I think that kind of resonated. So that's why I explored an opportunity in the Red Cross. And for the last 3 to 4 years, that's what I've been doing.
Okay.
So could you share with us more about what Family Life Aid is?
Sure. When Family Life Aid first started, we were actually just called Food Aid. That was about 6 to 7 years ago. We were only giving out meal vouchers for families to purchase groceries because we believe that instead of giving out like hot meals where we decide what they should eat, a lot of the families have the power to decide what they can put on the table. And it's different for different families. So what we do is when the referrals come in from social workers on an island-wide basis, we decide based on the funds that we have, the number of families that we can serve. And the families are all divided into 3 key categories. And how they were decided was really typically the categories of families that were not or underserved by the existing social service agencies. For example, single parents, not just single mothers. We actually have a number of single fathers in our program as well. And then the next one, it's the skipped generation. There's a generation that's missing from the entire family. We have one case of a grandmother who's looking after 12 grandchildren, and she does not have the means to take care of like them varying from 2 to 12. And she's the only one looking after them in a one-room flat.
Wow.
So there were a lot of like technical advice that she needed about the kind of subsidies that they could get, what kind of other assistance as a grandparent can they apply for the children. We realized that there actually is a big group of them in Singapore that doesn't fall into a certain common category. So when we receive these applications, we will assist them as well. And the third one, it's a group that we call the working poor. So basically, it just means that the income that they get cannot cover the expenditure of the family. Usually, like if a pandemic like COVID-19 hits, then a lot of the income is affected. And they can't cover their expenses anymore. So that's where we come in with our vouchers to try and give them a bit of a push.
Okay.
So apart from providing food vouchers, what other services do you guys provide?
Initially, we started off as just with a vouchers program, but last year we decided that it's for every month that we give out the vouchers, it puts food on the table, but it never gets them out of the situation, or we don't have the opportunity to journey with them a bit more. So we have expanded food aid into what we now call Family Life Aid, which focuses a lot more on the children and youth. As the parents are so busy trying to get money and trying to keep the family together amongst all the domestic issues and the social issues, we want to try and make sure that the children, especially those between the ages of 4 to 12, and also the younger youth, like the 13 to 17, actually has a certain mentor that can just talk to them. So for the 4 to 8, we do basic like ABCs and just enrichment programs. Because you'll be surprised, a lot of them, when you go to primary 1, some can't even speak a word of English. Whilst their peers who have the opportunity to go for tuition or additional classes can write long sentences and stuff like that when they enter primary 1. And then for the older kids, the 9 to 12, we do tuition. And it's all led by volunteers to just give them primarily in English, math, and science, to just kind of bring up their levels. And then for the youth, we just try to engage them and give them opportunities to become leaders in different ways. I give them platforms to explore what they like to do.
So actually, you did mention earlier about helping single parents as well. So I actually do have friends who are from single parent households, and I understand that it's hard being able, like, having to raise a family like on your own, especially if it's like a big family like that skip generation grandmother family that you talked about with the 12 children. I can't imagine how hard that is to be raising all these kids on your own. So could you perhaps tell us about maybe a single parent family or...
Yeah, we have actually quite a number. So typically, I think when people think of single parents, they will think of single mothers. But we also have single fathers in our program. It's interesting because as a single father, you have to play so many roles. You have to bring in the income to take care of. Because I think the subsidies for a single father, I don't think it's as much as for single mothers actually. Because they're supposed to get in the income as like the head of the household. And also you have to pay alimony to your wife, whether it's a divorce, etc. So we have one that he as an individual grew up in a really complicated background where he was adopted by parents who then passed on, and he was just living from different households. And he finally had money to, he was living with his friend for a long time, and then he finally had money to rent his own room. Then the custody of the child was given to him because it was all given to the mother. And then the mother couldn't take care of the child anymore. So this 2-year-old was then given to him. And then he was kicked out of his flat because the arrangement was that he had to only be one tenant. So now he has a child. So he was actually kicked out. And then now he has to find another rental flat. So he now lives with his aunt.
Yeah.
But all along, he had to hold an income to support himself and then his child, and also pay alimony to it. Yeah. So it depends on how they become single parent, right? Whether or not, and we have a lot of underage parents. We also have those that the wife have passed on. So typically there was dual income and 2 people were looking after 2 children. This is another family, and then the mother passed on. So it's not just the father looking after 2 children. Young children, and he wasn't able to work anymore because he had to look after them himself. But we managed to arrange something for him to come to work for the Red Cross. So that we could stagger the timings and be able to work around the school's schedule, so that at least he gets a bit of income along with community assistance while we continue to engage the children for tuition and enrichment and stuff like that.
All right.
Yeah, so there are many this type of situations that really goes under the radar, I think, in Singapore. So that's what we're trying to do for them.
So as we all know, COVID-19 has actually been affecting many families, and you've seen it affecting these needy families. So could you say that there's been an increase in applications?
Yes, for sure. And not just an increase, but like the profile of the families have changed as well. Typically, we would see those that have come in from existing rental flat situations, right? So they just kind of need additional assistance. But we now see people like pilots coming in to apply for assistance, your middle class and middle income coming in to apply for vouchers as well. I think it's really because they haven't been exposed to social service assistance before. But now with COVID, with the loss of jobs from industries that you would never expect, they don't really know where to go for help. And they don't know what kind of documents and stuff like that. But because Red Cross is a brand that they all kind of know does humanitarian work, so they would just either walk into our office or write in an email to just kind of inquire. So we have seen an increase in the number of applications. We have also seen a change in the time of profiles of the people that we may need to serve.
So earlier you mentioned that you helped out a grandmother with 12 grandchildren. I was actually curious as to how you actually helped her out.
So actually when the social worker referred the case to us, it was for the food aid vouchers. But we figured that when we went to do a home visit, that giving an old lady vouchers, having her going to the supermarket to get the groceries for the children was really not going to be helpful in her situation. And she did actually mention, if you go to her house, right, like all of them are sleeping on the floor. Only she has a mattress that looks really, really old and it doesn't have a bed sheet. And there were donations of like bolsters and pillows from other organizations and well-meaning individuals. But because nobody could take care of these kind of furniture at home, they all started to be yellow and they didn't have bed sheets and they were not taken care of well. And when we asked her what kind of further assistance that she might need for her grandchildren, she really just started crying because she was so tired. Her doors are perpetually open because the kids are coming in and out and she has no form of controlling, especially the older ones, because her house is just right next to, across the street from the hawker center. So you really sometimes when you go and visit the house, there would be kids that like 3 or 4 of them would be walking out and the grandmother would have no way of knowing where they're going because she just has so many people to manage. And she has the young ones that she has to prioritize.
Yeah.
So what we do is we stagger our teams of volunteers, some to do the Stories for All program that comes in on a different day of the week to teach the younger ones like the ABCs. And we see a great impact. In like 3 sessions, they didn't know how to speak English, the 4 to 8-year-olds. And then suddenly they can sing you a song about a rainbow and like they can draw their favorite birds and things like that. For the older ones, it was a bit harder to engage because they have no interest to study. So we just kind of hang out with them and really just talk to them and tell them to be a bit more, a bit kinder and thoughtful to their grandmother. And then we gave her the voucher so that she could typically more of buying not just groceries but also like the milk powder and diapers for the children. We also tried to link up with the schools that the children are in, so we get the school counselors involved. So that it's really a community effort and with the volunteers just kind of take care of them. Typically, we do our Stories for All program in their homes, but it was so crowded and they had to like, they have 3 volunteers and all the kids would be sitting on their laps and like standing around because there was no space. So after a while, the volunteers decided to hold the session at the playground downstairs. So it's just more spacious and just like to talk to them and stuff like that. And there were a lot of issues going on because a lot of the grandchildren were girls. So they had like a lot of like issues and, a lot of different interests and stuff like that.
Yeah, a lot of girl issues.
Yeah, a lot of girl issues. So it was really helpful to have like the female volunteers. Some of them about like your age, just going in there to just talk to them, and it's not like at a young age you can't talk about boys because in this day and age, like at 12 years old, you probably have a boyfriend.
Honestly.
Right? And you can't go in and tell them like, no, you cannot have a boyfriend. That's not what they would appreciate. So it really was just that kind of perspective. And you have like a father figure, like a volunteer, a guy who comes in and like tell them the do's and don'ts and stuff like that. So I think it was a good mix. But the challenge actually was to make sure that the volunteers' journey with the family is a bit longer because the attachment issues started to get quite strong after a while. But yeah, it's all part of the work, I think.
So how long did this whole thing with this family last?
It's still going on now, even though we have stopped giving her the vouchers because there are a lot of other community services that came in to assist. But we realized the one that's most impactful are the volunteers coming to engage children. So it's still going on now on a weekly basis where we have 2 different teams of volunteers going in, one to engage the younger ones and one to engage the older ones.
So have they like become happier?
I don't know about happier, but at least they can converse with you confidently in English. I think that they're doing a bit better in school, but because of COVID, I think a bit it went up and then it kind of went down a little bit again. Home-based learning was impossible for this family, like a lot of others. So we're just trying to build it up again just to see where it can bring us for the next year.
Yeah.
So during COVID, do you guys still have the opportunity to like help them out as much?
The volunteers themselves actually did offer to do a lot of calling and a lot of engagements when they couldn't visit. But now actually they are going in as like one person and like trying to engage them in smaller groups. So like 1 to 2 instead of like 1 to 4 or 5 last time.
Yeah.
So they're trying to do whatever they can to continue the engagement.
I think smaller groups are definitely better because it's like more targeted.
Yeah.
Because I mean, even like it's not really the same situation, but like growing up, like in tuition, I'd always prefer a smaller target because I feel like I'd have more attention.
Yeah.
I feel like they'd be paying more attention to me. I'd have better conversations. So yeah, I think it's better if you have like a targeted group.
Yeah, correct. So who exactly are these volunteers?
It could be anybody. So first we would usually reach out into our Red Cross pool of volunteers who can and are willing and have the patience to engage children. People who like to do storytelling or like to play games with children, or even youth who like to engage with other youth. Because I think one of the things that Family LifeAid wants to do is to expose these children to opportunities in life that are beyond what they know. For example, last year, we brought some of the kids to Google's office. I mean, it's a cool place. We didn't just want to bring it as an excursion, but we specifically told the staff of Google to engage the children to tell them that any one of them can become a staff of Google if they want to.
Yeah.
And it was very hard for them to understand it at first because they've never met somebody who worked at Google. They've always thought that the typical job scopes would be a teacher or a lawyer, but to work in Google, it's something that's like completely out of their minds. And they like to play games like Call of Duty, and we tell them that anybody can do animations or anything in this path. And it just blew their minds that they could become one of them.
So it's very inspiring towards them, yeah.
Yeah, and I think a lot of youth can also tell them that, like, you know, it doesn't really matter that you don't do typically very good when you're much younger, but you need to work as hard as you can to give yourself more opportunities to do anything that you want. Like some of them like to draw, and we usually tell them drawing can become animations if you want. If you like to talk and like to talk back to your teachers, use that in a good way to do mass communications, for example, right?
Correct.
So things like that is what we want to expose them to.
I'm gonna be completely honest here. I've never volunteered. I'm not even gonna say that I volunteered because I haven't. I've never had. I guess like I've just never really thought about it. To be completely honest,
We'll just give you the links afterwards. Immediately you can set up as a volunteer.
Yeah, because I think before this podcast, we actually didn't know that Red Cross provided us with such opportunities. You know, we always associated Red Cross with like Life Aid, blood donation, and all that. Yeah.
We've never like realized that there was so much more to Red Cross, which is exactly why we're having all these podcast episodes, so youths can know more about it like ourselves. But the thing is, when thinking about stuff like the storytelling aspect of it, let's say as someone like myself, I like the idea of being able to help children like learn more, especially like in terms of English. I'd love the idea of storytelling, but I wouldn't exactly know, would I need qualifications to sign up or?
You don't need qualifications at all. So actually, for a lot of our volunteer opportunities, we're not looking for anybody who's particularly qualified or a professional with a certain expertise. For us, we're just looking for volunteers who are really willing to journey with the kids and just kind of spend time with them. There's no right or wrong, but we will definitely give you a certain briefing at the beginning, like the do's and don'ts, you know, how to make them comfortable and what not to do when you go for a home visit. It's more like a briefing than a training. But afterwards, we'll just find, like, based on languages, what's the best to match with the kids. Maybe in terms of gender, we also have to be a bit more sensitive about that. But other than that, we'll give you a starter kit of books that we think that the kids might like, and really off you go, just kind of engage them. The first visit, we would usually be accompanied by a staff, and then after you just kind of get to know the kids better, because we really just want a mentor, like somebody who can talk to the kids. And the tools, like the books and the ABCs, are just really things for you to use to engage them, instead of going there empty-handed and then they're like, don't really know how to engage or react. So these are just tools for you, and eventually it's just from the talking and the engagement and the communications that they know that they have a new brother and sister who's kind of hang out with them.
So as a volunteer, am I able to choose which aspect I want to help out with, or will Red Cross assign me something?
Yes, of course. So when you sign up, you can already tell us your areas of interest. But other than that, when you receive any of our applications, like, you know, the recruitment calls, you just come down and find out more of what it takes, and, like, you know, what's the opportunity about, what's the commitment level, and then after that you can decide. But more importantly, it's really about knowing how much and how long you want to commit for. Like some, and I think a lot of volunteers will be more interested to start off with like a one-time off kind of thing. Like a distribution or like a one-off event kind of volunteer. So you can start off doing that first before coming to do a program.
I think that's the biggest concern for someone like me who's never volunteered. It's the commitment period. Like you mentioned that LifeAid is more about journeying with them, getting to know them and actually connecting with them. But as for, like, for example, myself, I'd want to try volunteering, but I wouldn't be so sure about how long I would be committed to it. I wouldn't know if I'd be able to come more than once. So let's say if someone like myself volunteered for a one-time off. Is that still fine? Or?
That's fine. And we would be worried if somebody comes up to us on the first day and say, I'll be able to commit my entire lives Mondays to.
Yeah.
It's a bit like scary also,
A bit.
right? So what we do is, at this point, because if it's on a home base, when you visit them in the homes, it becomes a bit more personal because you're literally like 1 to 2 kids. So we would usually introduce volunteers to the Family LifeAid Programme under this other one that we do. So Young Hearts that I've explained is on an island-wide basis, right? So you go into the houses, etc. But we also have one that is at a void deck of 2 identified rental flats. So this is in soon. And what we did, and this was only started in last year in February, where we actually identified like 2 of the rental flats with like many, many children. They needed just a third space to study because the houses were not conducive. So together with the advisor of the district, we just kind of repainted the void deck to make it look a bit more warm and cozy.
What color?
So the children actually could decide. They come up with a brainstorming session of what they wanted to see on the walls.
Oh, so cute.
So we actually got some people to come and design, and then they painted the walls together with like the professional painters. So now it looks like a magical forest
Oh, that's cute.
theme. With like the little animals here and there. And then there's another one for the older kids. It's just like a wall that says stronger together. It's just kind of like a reminder and just to break that monotony of all the white walls you see at the void deck. So every Thursday before COVID, we would hold a program where the whatever I've just mentioned about Stories for and tuition is at the void deck itself. Sometimes we would see over 40 to 50 children between the ages of 4 to 17 coming down to hang out with us. And that's a good place to start because your engagement with them is on a larger scale. So your absence will not be felt as much as if you go into the home-based tuition and engagement. So usually we will get the volunteers who just want to try out to come for this program and then just kind of see that if they like the program, then they can continue from there. Because I think the commitment grows when you feel commitment not just to the program, but to the people that you're volunteering with and for. So I think that could be a good place to start. We're hoping that it would start again soon. But now we're just doing the tuitions in very small groups for the children.
So clearly because of COVID affecting everyone, you weren't able to visit them at the void deck. So have you noticed any changes perhaps? Like, do you think there was an impact of not being able to see them or?
Yeah, I think that the impact started as early as the moment that we had to suspend the program in March and April, because I think a lot of these kids come from very complicated backgrounds, and a lot of them are just fighting for your attention or for their adults' attention, because they are sharing their attention at home, not just with their siblings, but also with like whatever is troubling the parents, whether it could be financial issues or like domestic conflicts, etc. So they always feel like they needed to shout to get something that they want to just be heard. And I think during our program at the Void Deck, because we have almost a one-to-one kind of attention with them, they feel like they are, an individual who's not judged or measured by their family situations.
So they feel heard.
Yeah, they feel heard exactly. And as an individual, and like somebody really wants to hear what I as a person has to say, no matter my age. And I am not the eldest son of the family that have to look after all my siblings. I am not the eldest one that needs to take care of the family because of my parents, right? I am just a child.
Yeah.
We have seen one example of a kid that we knew him last year. He was in primary 6. And I think this is what we call a potential youth at risk case, where he was at a point of being angry with his family for the responsibilities that he had to cover when he's actually just a child, right? Then there wasn't anybody that could listen to him and what he wants, what he likes. So of course he went to look outwards, and look for like the companies that would think of it as a brotherhood. They're like, I am your brother. Now let's go and do like, cool/illegal things together.
Okay, yeah.
And it's just kind of like he was on the brink of it when we started actually. But he knew what was right and wrong to do, and he always looked forward to talk to us, because we don't tell him like that's a terrible thing to do, and you're the eldest child. But we don't use that kind of condescending tone.
Because essentially they just become upset with you if you were just to tell them off.
Yeah, and they know what's right and wrong. They just need somebody to come and tell them, to hear them out.
Empathize with them, right?
Exactly, yeah. And I think a lot of empathy must come from a place of really knowing where they're coming from.
Yeah.
Like for example, there was once that he would drink a lot of Red Bull, because he saw like the older kids drinking a lot of Red Bull,
Oh
like
my
the
god,
adults
I
drinking
did
Red
that.
Bull,
I was that kid.
which is terrible for you,
You
right?
think that you're cool drinking
Yeah.
like a ton of Red Bull if you're a
Exactly.
grown up or
Yeah.
something.
And he was
Like
putting on
BTEC.
so much weight and he couldn't sleep because he was just
Oh,
drinking Red Bull
no.
and Coke because it's what everybody else was drinking. But he knew it was wrong, right? So when he came to us and we tell him that as a kid who was like this big size trying to be a gangster, like actually decided to take a video and say, I promise I will never drink Red Bull again because it's bad for me. So he's a child at heart, you know? And at that point you could see like there's a lot of changes because he really just hangs out and he tries to be cool at first, like standoffish. But once you sit down with him, he wants to talk for the entire night. And we weren't able to go down and see him since March because of suspension. And really his behavior just kind of regressed quite exponentially from there. So he got into quite a bit of trouble with the law. And once when we were talking to his younger brother who was under our tuition program, the brother actually just said very candidly, yeah, it's because of you guys, because you are not there. That's why he became like that.
Ayo.
Yeah, so I think that was something that really impacted us and made us feel like, you know, the present is not just the academics, but really like the talking to them.
Yeah.
So when we returned to see him, he actually had a cigarette in his pocket and he wanted to show it to us. He knew it was wrong. So we just kind of look at him and he's like, no lah, I don't want to smoke, I just want to show you. And then he was just like, he had his own thoughts. He knew it was wrong, right? And then afterwards, he just kind of, at the end of the night, he just threw it away. Like he just wanted that attention.
Yeah.
I think. And not to just be put as a person who, you know, I need to take care of my like siblings now, or like, you know, whenever, and it has come to a point because of all the things that he's done, that and the parents understandably are so stressed by so many things, that whenever like a teacher or somebody approaches the parents, right, they were like, what did my son do now? And he's like, I didn't do anything.
They're already expecting something. Yeah.
And we have another one who says, another kid who's only primary 5, and he would say like, you know, they all think, all the parents and everybody else think that I like to lie. So even when I'm telling the truth, they think I'm lying anyway. So what's the point?
Yeah, correct.
Like, how do you juggle these with them, right? So the only way is to really be able to know them as individuals and come in from a perspective of like, you know, you are a bit different from the rest of the people that I've seen. Then I would be able to open up a bit more to you. And you would be surprised the kind of things that they would tell you. Underage pregnancy, for example, or like maybe interest to join gangs, etc., etc. And many of these things. But I think as somebody in the community resilience or like community services, right, or social service, you can't come in and tell them, no, this is wrong, stop it now.
Yeah.
But you must find a time to be able to get them to refer to help if really needed.
Actually, I wanted to ask, so you weren't able to meet up with them during COVID, right? So obviously that was hard because it's like all the progress you've been building on is, you know, you can't continue building on it. But were you able to maybe talk to them online? Would that have been too different or?
Actually, we didn't talk to them much online because a lot of them don't have access to Wi-Fi, and they don't even have a phone. And even for home-based learning, they don't have access to like laptops and stuff like that. So, we had almost a hard stop and a hard suspension of like communications with them. But the moment that we could, occasionally we would do like the 1 or 2 home visits just to kind of walk by and like say hi. It's easier for the ones on the ones at Nisun because they're all living in the same flat, in the same 2 flats, right? But then for the ones that are on an island-wide basis, we actually get the volunteers to, because they already exchange numbers with the teens if they have phones. But a lot of them don't. Like, you would be surprised in this day and age how many of them actually would sit there at the void deck and just like tap on other people's Wi-Fi. So a lot of it still happens. So we weren't able to engage a lot of them during that period.
See, now I feel a bit bad now because it just didn't even cross my mind that could be like a thing, like not having a phone. Like it just, for myself, I just thought immediately, they must have phones. You could have just talked to them online. So I feel a little bad for assuming that now.
And I think you'd be surprised also at like how difficult it was for them to get access to laptops for the home-based learning at the beginning because the demand was just so high. And some of the houses are just not conducive to keep like technology lying around because they have so many children, you know, like another family that through word of mouth we're currently assisting. We went to see the house. The parents actually have 7 children of their own, but their house is also a safe space for at least 10 other kids. Like they're friends of the children to come and hang out when their own families are having issues. So in that 1-bedroom flat, sometimes you would see about 15 people just kind of hanging out.
Oh, okay.
And it's really because it's just a safe space. They might be low income, they might financially difficult, but it's in a place where they just feel happy hanging out. And none of the children have phones, only the parents have. They have one tablet that was donated. And recently, I think somebody donated a laptop to them. But because there were so many kids at home, then there's no... when we went, they didn't have a cabinet. They had one mattress. They had one sofa. And they had like 3 stools. That was all that they had at home. And a fridge. It was all they had in their homes. And so it was very difficult for these kids to communicate with anybody. And it's hard to believe because a lot of them are in secondary schools, but they would take turns to try to like share using the phone. And they didn't have Wi-Fi at home. So they were using completely on data. So these are like little situations that we do see. And really when it comes back to like making difficult choices, because the parents are again so obsessed with trying to bring in the money to raise the family and things like that, the kids who are in lower secondary decided that they wanted to do something to help the parents, but nobody was there to help them to decide what's the correct and wrong thing to do.
Yeah.
So they had a bit of a run-in with the law, trying to earn some money for the parents and get some income for them. It affected their studies. And one of the girls who we visited actually asked if, because she had to be retained in secondary 2, she actually did ask if her life was over just because of that.
Aiyo.
And we had to like, no, it really isn't. And there were so many things that you have to journey with them. So many thought processes that you have to journey with them. Different families really have different situations really, and different difficulties. Yeah.
I can kind of understand how hard it is, like not personally, but I kind of understand how hard it is to have to share everything in such a big family because like I am from the Philippines and I've got family members like my cousins. So they've got to share a lot of stuff too, and they don't have the best things. So that's why like my side of the family tries their best to like give them whatever we can, like some of our old mattresses or something like that. Like you mentioned them having to share one mattress, and it's just hard to think about because, you know, they could just be someone that you love, your family member. And so I guess that's like a big point for someone who's thinking about volunteering. Like just imagine like what if it was your family member? Of course you'd want to help them. So I guess that forms a big point of it, like wanting to make more connections.
Yeah, and I think from the perspective of a youth who's, you know, considering to volunteer, it's also important to come from a direction of possibly just sharing your experience as a youth, right, with another youth. Because a lot of these youth, I think at some point in Singapore, you share similar challenges when it comes to like expectations from the family, or if you're the only child, or if you're in a big family, there are similar challenges. But I think also we do see youth coming from a place of like a top-down perspective, right? Like I come in to tell the youth what to do and what not to do. But I think it's really just to be a friend.
Yeah.
Just to be a friend with a peer, you know, who comes from a different situation. So sometimes for volunteers, we don't tell them the background of these families. Because with the background, even for adults, you come in with a certain impression and a certain stereotype. So we just want to say that you come in and do like tuition, right? English, math, science, come in and talk to them. And it would tell you different situations. For example, the youth, the volunteers that we have now for the tuition program, they're youth themselves. And they've just finished like poly, or some of them are still going through poly. But they do hear things from the kid, but they just use their own life experience to share with them. While there are certain guidelines of what to say and what not to say, and what to encourage and not to encourage, there are also things that we would tell the volunteers that they have to flag out to us. For example, very upfront suicidal ideation, don't keep it to yourself, raise it to us immediately. Sure. But if it's things like what you like on TikTok, or what kind of games you play, you know, those kind of things, you can just kind of share with them like your similar situations. But I think volunteers who are dealing with children and youth must also be open to share their experience without judgment.
Yeah.
Correct.
And they sometimes would forget themselves to like, oh, I didn't know that you don't have this, and you know, like you're from a much more challenging predicament than us. But yeah, it's also for the volunteers to benefit, actually, to just be like, feel fortunate in their situations, and also just understand that everybody is just like you guys. Like, they're just youth. You know, they want to go to school, they want to go to poly, and they have to go through the compulsory education. These are just paths of a Singaporean. Yeah, so don't put too much expectations, like, oh my gosh, and responsibility and burden that a volunteer has so much to do. Just to come in and be a friend to another youth.
Yeah,
really.
just lend a listening ear, I suppose, right?
And let them braid their hair. Let them braid your hair sometimes, or like, teach them like if they want to look at your fancy watch or like, the things that you're wearing, just kind of talk to them about fashion, things like that. And
so talking about reaching out amongst our own community, I do have a friend that I know, a very close friend, and I understand from their situation that they possibly could be one of the needy families. So how would I know whether he's eligible for this kind of family life aid, or is there like a way for him to sign up, or?
Sure, there are platforms and many platforms online that they can apply. But I think the most important thing actually is to get their consent before you assist. So I think after this, you can also definitely tell them that the Red Cross is one of the platforms that they can reach out for assistance. But anytime that they want to drop by like a nearest family service center or any kind of community center, but it's also important before you act on behalf of somebody to just kind of seek their consent, because sometimes there would be families that are in such troubling situations that they don't want to reach out. For example, we were just giving care packages to a family just as an additional push for them. They actually wrote in to say that it has benefited them in ways that it's hard to describe, because they have been in a situation for so long, they don't know where to get help, and also it could be because of their dignity, because they've never been asking for help, like the pilots that we've mentioned, right? But now with like somebody reaching out to them, they now feel comforted that there could be assistance out there that they qualify for. But they must first be the one to agree to it and want to seek the assistance. But you can always bring it up in conversations, just to plant that idea in their heads. And if they want, then they can just go online or like give us a call, and we can just get in touch with them very quickly.
But I'm sure that you guys get many applicants. So how do you guys select who to help?
That's always one of the most challenging things we've had to do. As an organization that relies on public donations, how much we can help is how much donations we get. So we're only typically able to help 150 families a year, regardless of household sizes. It's all referred by social workers, or they can walk into our office, or they can just write in to us. I will usually do a home visit. But how we decide, typically it's just really as a concrete assistance provider, just giving the vouchers. I think we need to prioritize those that require urgent or immediate assistance, that we see that the vouchers can help them to clear some of their arrears, or really give them a push to get out of the situation, as opposed to somebody who has been in this predicament for a long time. I think that's where somebody like a family service center need to come in to look after them holistically. So I think that's how we decide. So just to give you a bit of perspective, every year we could receive up to 500 to 600 applications. But we could only choose 151 because of the funding that we receive.
Oh, the choice must be really hard for that.
Yeah, it goes back to the 3 categories that we have: skip generation, working poor, and single parent, and also the urgency of the situation.
One question that I really want to ask is why youth should volunteer? Because I think that many a times we think that we are too busy and we already have like so much on our plate. So why should we volunteer?
I mean, ultimately, you don't have to volunteer, but I think it really would add a certain dynamic to your life to be able to just kind of reach out to someone else that might just need a bit of your time. It's challenging for youth to be able to afford a bit of the time out, but I think it could be seen as making a new friend or expanding your knowledge and experience in life, especially now during this period where we can't really travel, or there are a lot of limitations to our social life. It could be a good time for you to expand, just understanding the community a bit. Again, it doesn't have to be with the Red Cross. It doesn't have to be for youth or children, but it could just be something that you like. And the first question would be, what kind of profiles are you more interested to and keen to support? Some people could be, animals or anything, right? But I think if it comes to the local community, the Red Cross has elderly, children, youth, migrant workers, so many different types of profiles you can assist. And there are different opportunities for you to jump from one to another. But why, from a personal perspective, it really just expands your outlook on life. That you start to realize that the things that you're troubled by seems very, very small. Or you could seem like you're not alone in sharing that same situation or the challenges that you're facing. Because somebody else who lives in just another part of Singapore could be facing the same thing. You could also take this as an opportunity to find people with similar interests It could be finding people who that you want to be able to guide because you've seen how it has benefited when you tutor your cousins or something like that, Especially people who do very well in school in a certain subject, please come and volunteer so that you can, via the local syllabus, be able to guide them on like how to answer some of the examination questions. A lot of times, these kids, they don't do well because they don't understand the question. If you get somebody who's a bit more senior, who's out of the syllabus and the system a bit, it's hard for them to resonate. So somebody who is about the same age group will be able to speak the same language and help them to understand life in the same era.
Correct.
So I think that's why we're usually very interested and passionate to get youth to come on board for Family LifeAid.
I think it's really important now that we know volunteering isn't about helping someone, but more like making friends.
Forging friends.
Yeah.
Making new connections. So it's nice knowing that it can just be something casual like that.
Yes.
Yeah. So I guess one last question would probably be how could we sign up? How can we be a part of this?
So if you like to be a volunteer, you can go to our website, redcross.sg. It's easy to navigate. You can just sign up from there. But otherwise, if you are not ready to volunteer yet, it's no problem. You can find out more or even share with your friends via social media. We're all on social media these days, Facebook, Instagram, at SG Red Cross. And just kind of find out more and share with the people around you who might be ready and keen to volunteer.
Okay, well, I guess we will stay tuned for all of these social media pages. And thank you so much for everything you've taught us
No
today.
problem.
And
No problem.
thank you for watching this podcast episode. This is Angela,
This is Ish.
and we are signing off. See you next time.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Crosstalk. Hope you enjoyed it. Stay tuned for more episodes.